The day a little girl pointed, and a police dog changed the verdict. No one in that crowded courtroom could have imagined what would happen next. The judge was ready to end the trial. The accused was moments from losing everything, and the air was so heavy, you could almost feel it pressing against your chest. And then, a small voice broke the silence. A 6-year-old girl stood up, trembling, and pointed toward the judge's bench. Her words were soft, but they struck like lightning. "Rex, there. That's where Daddy's truth is." Every head turned. Every breath stopped. What followed was something no camera, no witness, no lawyer would ever forget. A German Shepherd police dog leaped toward the bench, not to attack, but to uncover what no one dared to see. Hidden beneath the judge's own papers was the truth that would change everything. This is not just a story about a courtroom. It's about a bond stronger than fear, between a man, his daughter, and a dog whose loyalty could not be silenced. The morning sunlight filtered through the glass walls of Ward Financial Group, bathing the lobby in gold. Employees hurried past, briefcases in hand, greeting one another with practiced smiles. And there, at the heart of it all, stood Ethan Ward, the company's youngest executive, a man known for his calm presence and incorruptible integrity. At 32, Ethan had built his career on trust. To his employees, he wasn't just a boss. He was a mentor, a friend, the kind of leader who remembered birthdays, who stayed late to help interns meet deadlines. People said that in a world full of greed, Ethan was the rare man whose handshake still meant something. That morning, though, the air around him felt heavier. A call from the accounting department, a sudden meeting with the board. Nervous glances from his assistant as she handed him a folder marked "Confidential." Ethan tried to brush it off. He told himself it was routine. But deep down, a cold unease began to twist inside his chest. When he entered the boardroom, silence greeted him. Around the table sat the senior executives, faces pale, eyes avoiding his. On the screen behind them, a slideshow of figures flashed. Missing funds, unauthorized transfers, and at the bottom, his name. "Ethan," the chairman's voice trembled. "We've found evidence linking you to the embezzlement of $10 billion. The words struck him like a bullet. For a moment, Ethan could only stare. "What? That's impossible," he whispered. "I've never—" But the faces around him said it all. They had already judged him guilty. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire. Television networks aired the story every hour. Corporate scandal. Star executive accused of billion-dollar fraud. Paparazzi camped outside his house. Online articles called him the golden boy turned greedy. Ethan's world collapsed in a single day. At home, his wife Clara sat frozen on the couch, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the headlines. "They're saying you stole from your own company," she whispered. "Tell me it's not true." "It's not," Ethan said softly, kneeling before her. "You know me. I would never—" But she couldn't look at him. Tears streamed down her cheeks. From the hallway, a small voice interrupted the storm. "Mommy? Daddy?" It was Lily, their 6-year-old daughter, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide and confused. "Why are there so many people outside? Why are they saying bad things about Daddy?" Ethan's throat tightened. He opened his arms, and Lily ran into them. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured, pressing his face into her hair. "Everything's going to be okay." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. Outside, the barking of their German Shepherd, Rex, echoed through the yard. The dog paced restlessly behind the fence, sensing the turmoil inside the house. His golden brown eyes followed every shadow that passed, his instincts on high alert. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, while Clara cried softly beside him. His phone buzzed again and again, calls from lawyers, reporters, and friends, who suddenly sounded cautious and distant. Rex lay by his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes never leaving his master. Occasionally, he let out a low growl, as if warning something unseen. When dawn came, Ethan put on his suit as usual. He kissed Lily on the forehead before heading downstairs. But as he reached for the doorknob, flashing blue and red lights flooded the front windows. "Ethan Ward," a voice boomed outside. "You're under arrest for corporate fraud and embezzlement." Clara screamed. Lily dropped her toy. Ethan froze, disbelief plastered across his face. "This is a mistake," he shouted, as two officers stormed in, reading his rights. Rex barked furiously, his claws scraping the floor as he lunged forward. One of the officers raised a hand in warning, but the dog wouldn't stop. He could feel the fear, the injustice, the chaos ripping through the room. "Rex, no!" Ethan yelled, his voice breaking. The dog stopped only because Ethan's eyes told him to. His body trembled, teeth bared, heart pounding. Lily's sobs filled the air. She clung to her mother, watching in horror as the officers pulled out handcuffs. "Daddy!" she cried. "Daddy didn't do it!" Ethan turned, his eyes meeting his daughter's. That look of pure innocence, of faith unbroken. It shattered him more than the cuffs on his wrists. "I didn't, sweetheart," he whispered, voice cracking. "I promise you I didn't." The metal closed around his wrists with a click that echoed through the house. Cameras flashed through the windows. Reporters shouted questions. Rex howled, a deep, mournful sound that seemed to shake the walls themselves. He lunged again, snapping the leash that held him. It took two officers to hold him back as he barked and thrashed. His eyes locked on the man being taken away. Neighbors watched from across the street as Ethan Ward, once admired by all, was led to a waiting police car. The sky darkened with approaching rain. Inside, Lily screamed and ran after him, only to be held back by her mother. "Daddy," she cried again, tears streaking her cheeks. "He didn't do it. Daddy didn't do it." Ethan looked back one last time before being pushed into the car. The sight of his daughter's trembling hands pressed against the glass door burned itself into his soul. As the car drove away, thunder rolled across the horizon. Rex broke free from the officer's grip, chasing the car until his paws hit the edge of the street. He stopped there, chest heaving, eyes fierce and wet. He didn't understand the law, the accusations, or the numbers. All he knew was that the man he loved, the man whose voice guided him, whose hand fed him, was in trouble. And somehow, some way, Rex would bring him back. The prison cell was cold and gray, a narrow box of silence that smelled faintly of rust and hopelessness. Ethan Ward sat on the edge of a metal cot, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the concrete floor beneath him. Outside the bars, the world went on. Footsteps, echoing doors, guards muttering orders. But inside, time had stopped. 3 days had passed since his arrest. 3 days since his little girl screamed his innocence to deaf ears. 3 days since the handcuffs dug into his wrists, and his life crumbled like dust in a storm. A heavy clang of metal announced the arrival of a visitor. The guard's voice broke through the stillness. "Ward, you've got someone." Ethan looked up, slow and weary. Beyond the gate stood Michael Cole, his longtime friend and lawyer, wearing the same tailored suit Ethan used to admire for its sharp confidence. But today, Michael's tie was crooked, his eyes red-rimmed, the look of a man carrying too many secrets and not enough hope. The door opened. Ethan was led into the visiting room, where a pane of scratched glass separated them. "Michael," Ethan said quietly as he sat down. His voice was low, hoarse from sleepless nights. "Tell me you found something." Michael didn't answer right away. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and laid it on the table. "I wish I could," he said. "But the evidence, Ethan, it all points to you." He flipped the folder open. Pages of transactions, digital logs, and signed authorizations spilled out. Every number, every signature, every line pointed to one man, Ethan Ward. Ethan leaned closer, disbelief carving deep lines into his face. "Time hundreds. That can't be right. I never signed any of these transfers. These aren't mine." "I've checked," Michael said, his voice soft but firm. "The system shows your password, your authorization codes, your biometric ID. It's airtight." Ethan slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing across the room. "Then someone planted it. You know me, Michael. You know I'd never steal a cent." Michael's lips pressed into a hard line. "I do. But without proof, it's your word against theirs." Ethan's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind spinning. Faces flashed through his thoughts. The board members, the people he trusted most. Men who shook his hand, smiled at him in meetings, toasted to his success. "The board," he whispered. "It has to be them. They've been trying to get rid of me for months. They wanted me out of the company. My shares, my position, everything. What if they found a way to frame me?" Michael's eyes darkened. "You'd need proof, and right now they control the evidence." Silence fell between them, heavy as the air before a storm. Michael sighed and leaned back. "I'll keep digging. But Ethan, I need you to prepare for the worst." Ethan looked up, meeting his friend's gaze. "The worst already happened the day they took me from my daughter." Michael swallowed hard, unable to speak. The guard tapped his watch. The visit was nearly over. Before standing, Michael hesitated. "Ethan, about the judge. I've heard rumors. Connections between him and the board. If that's true, we're up against more than a courtroom. We're up against a wall." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we'll find a way over it." But his voice lacked conviction. The boardroom that once echoed with laughter and ambition was now cloaked in darkness. The blinds were drawn. Only the faint glow of the city filtered through the cracks. Around the long mahogany table sat 5 men, the true architects of Ethan's downfall. At the head of the table, Richard Hale, the company's CEO, poured himself a glass of whiskey. "So," he said, his tone casual but cold, "everything's going as planned?" "Perfectly," replied another, a man with thin spectacles and a smirk. "The police seized Ethan's accounts. The media's devouring him. By next week, he'll be nothing but a headline." "And the judge?" Hale asked. "Bought and sealed. He'll push for conviction before Ethan's team can even breathe." Laughter rippled through the room, but beneath it was something darker. Fear. They all knew the stakes. $10 billion wasn't just money. It was power, freedom, and leverage, and Ethan had been the one obstacle in their way. "Make sure his lawyer stays under pressure," Hale added. "If he gets too curious, we'll make sure his firm gets a little reminder of who's in charge." The men nodded. Hale raised his glass. "To justice. Our kind of justice." They toasted in silence. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The rain had begun to fall. The house was quiet, except for the occasional crack of lightning. Lily sat curled up on the living room floor, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Beside her, Rex lay motionless, head on his paws. His food bowl sat untouched. "Rex, please eat," Lily whispered, pushing the bowl closer. The dog didn't move. His ears twitched, but his eyes stayed fixed on the front door, the door where Ethan had last stood before they took him away. Lily crawled closer and wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. "We'll save Daddy, okay?" she said softly. Her voice trembled with the innocence of a promise she didn't fully understand. Rex turned his head slightly, his nose brushing against her cheek. A low, mournful whine escaped his throat. Clara stood in the doorway, watching them. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow from days of crying. She wanted to tell her daughter everything would be fine, that justice would prevail, that truth would win. But the words wouldn't come. She didn't believe them herself. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the walls with brief, cruel light. The sound of thunder followed, deep and rolling, shaking the windows. In that moment, the entire world seemed to grieve with them. A family torn apart, a loyal dog mourning in silence, and a man sitting alone in a cell, holding on to the last thread of faith that justice hadn't died completely. And as the storm raged over the city, Rex lifted his head toward the rain-soaked window and let out a long, echoing howl, a cry that carried through the wind like a vow. Somewhere far away, in that gray prison cell, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't hear the sound itself, but somehow, he knew. His friend hadn't given up on him. Not yet. Outside, thunder cracked once more, the sound of betrayal echoing through the night. Night had fallen over the Ward home like a heavy curtain. The city lights flickered distantly through the rain-soaked windows, casting faint reflections on the polished floor. The house, once filled with laughter and the hum of evening conversations, now stood in silence, the kind of silence that carries grief in its bones. It had been nearly a week since Ethan Ward was taken away. His absence had become a living thing, haunting every corner of the house. The ticking clock in the living room seemed louder than ever, counting down each second of their loneliness. In his study, the one place Lily wasn't usually allowed to play, the faint smell of her father's cologne still lingered in the air. Papers were stacked neatly on the shelves, family pictures lined the desk, and the leather chair stood slightly turned, as if waiting for its owner to return. 6-year-old Lily stood in the doorway, her small hands gripping her stuffed rabbit. Her mother had finally fallen asleep after another day of tears, leaving Lily awake and restless. She wanted to feel closer to her father. To her, the office wasn't just a room. It was where Daddy used to tell her stories after work, where he'd lift her onto his lap and let her pretend to sign papers like a big girl. "Come on, Rex," she whispered. The German shepherd padded quietly behind her, his claws clicking softly against the floor. His coat shimmered faintly under the dim desk lamp. His ears were alert, his eyes sharp, but softer whenever they looked at the little girl. Lily climbed onto her father's chair. It was too big for her, and her feet dangled above the carpet. She spun slightly, giggling for the first time in days. But then the laughter faded as she stared at the empty desk. Her father's nameplate sat untouched. Ethan Ward, Executive Director. "I miss you, Daddy," she whispered, running a finger across the nameplate. Rex, sitting near the bookshelf, tilted his head and let out a quiet whine. Then, as if something had caught his attention, he stood up and began sniffing around the room. His movements grew sharper, focused, purposeful. "Rex?" Lily asked softly, watching as he moved to the corner of the office near an old oak cabinet. He pawed at the bottom drawer, claws scraping lightly against the wood. "Hey, stop," Lily said, sliding off the chair. "That's Daddy's." But Rex wouldn't stop. He pawed again, once, twice, then let out a low, frustrated growl. Lily crouched beside him. The drawer was locked. Her eyes widened. "What is it?" Rex looked at her, tail twitching, then back at the drawer. He pressed his nose against the small brass handle and barked once, sharply. "Okay, okay," Lily whispered, glancing toward the hallway to make sure her mother wasn't awake. She reached for the drawer handle, pulling. It didn't budge. She tried again, still locked. Then she remembered something. Her father always kept a small silver key inside a photo frame on the bookshelf, a picture of the three of them at the park. She climbed up on a chair, took the frame down, and gently pulled the key from the back. Her heart thudded as she knelt by the drawer. The key fit perfectly. With a quiet click, the lock released. Inside, beneath a stack of business reports and old contracts, something gleamed in the dim light. A small flash drive, wrapped in a paper labeled Board Transfer Plan. Lily frowned, not understanding what it meant, but her instincts told her it was important. She turned to Rex. "You found it," she whispered. The dog wagged his tail once, quietly proud. Lily took the flash drive and held it close. "We should show Mr. Michael," she said, remembering the nice man who'd come to visit her father in the cold, gray place. The next morning, under a sky still gray with leftover rain, Michael Cole arrived at the ward house. He looked exhausted, his suit wrinkled, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights spent digging for answers. When Clara opened the door, she tried to smile, but it barely reached her eyes. "We don't have much hope left, Michael," she said quietly. "The court date's next week." "Hope doesn't always come from where we expect it," he replied gently. Then Lily appeared from behind the couch, clutching something in her small hands. "Mr. Michael," she said, her voice small but urgent. "Rex found something." Michael blinked. "Rex found something?" She nodded and held out the flash drive. The label, Board Transfer Plan, was still smudged but legible. Michael took it carefully, his lawyer's instincts immediately on alert. "Where did you get this?" Lily pointed toward the office. "In Daddy's drawer. Rex showed me." For a long second, Michael stared at the drive in disbelief. Then, without another word, he rushed to his laptop and plugged it in. Lines of data filled the screen. Transaction records, confidential memos, encrypted transfers. He scrolled faster, his heartbeat quickening. And then he froze. There it was. A series of emails between the board members, detailing the false accounts they'd created under Ethan's name. Hidden transfers. Fraudulent signatures. A plan to move billions offshore, pinned on one scapegoat. Michael leaned back, his eyes wide. "My God," he whispered. This could prove everything." Clara covered her mouth, trembling. "You mean Ethan is innocent?" Michael finished, turning to her. "If we can authenticate these files, it could save him." At that, Lily's eyes lit up for the first time in days. She turned to Rex, who sat quietly by the door, watching everyone with patient eyes. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his thick neck. "You're the smartest dog in the world," she whispered, her voice breaking with a soft laugh. Rex leaned into her hug, letting out a gentle huff, almost like a sigh of relief. Michael watched the two of them for a moment, emotion tightening his throat. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "justice doesn't come from men in suits. It comes from hearts that refuse to give up." Lily smiled, pressing her cheek against Rex's fur. Outside, the clouds began to break, and a shaft of sunlight spilled through the window, falling directly across the little girl and the loyal dog who had just uncovered the first spark of hope. The storm wasn't over, far from it. But for the first time, the darkness had a crack of light running through it. And in that fragile light, something began to shift, the sense that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to be found. The city's skyline glimmered faintly beneath a pale moon, but for Michael Cole, the world had never felt darker. The flash drive, the one that Lily and Rex had discovered, had become his lifeline. He carried it everywhere, hidden inside the lining of his briefcase, like a heartbeat he couldn't afford to lose. It was proof. Proof that Ethan Ward had been framed. Proof that could tear down the powerful men who had ruined an innocent life. But proof also came with danger. At first, the signs were subtle. A black car parked too long across the street. A man pretending to read a newspaper outside his office. A phone line that crackled with silence whenever he picked it up. Then the messages began. Anonymous emails. A single sentence repeated, "Stop digging, Mr. Cole." Michael deleted them, pretending not to care. But every night, as he stared at the flickering glow of his computer screen, he could feel eyes watching him from the dark. Meanwhile, at the Ward home, tension was thick enough to taste. Clara barely slept. She drew the curtains tight and kept the lights dim, afraid that someone might be watching. Lily, sensing the unease, clung even closer to Rex, refusing to let him out of her sight. One evening, as thunder rolled across the horizon, Michael arrived at the house with a laptop tucked under his arm and exhaustion in his eyes. "We've done it," he told Clara, lowering his voice. "The files are real. I've verified the metadata. They can't be forged. Once I present this in court, Ethan's going to walk free." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank God." But in the corner, Rex paced near the window, ears twitching. He stopped, staring out into the darkness, a low growl vibrating in his throat. "What's wrong, boy?" Lily asked softly, but Rex didn't respond. His gaze was locked on the street, the same street where headlights flickered briefly, then vanished. Michael frowned. "You should keep the curtains closed," he murmured, instinctively touching his briefcase. "Until the trial's over, we can't trust anyone." That night, long after the house had gone quiet, a car rolled slowly to a stop 2 blocks away. Inside, 2 men sat in silence. One of them, heavy-set with a scar down his cheek, lifted a pair of binoculars. "There," he muttered. "That's the lawyer." The driver's lips curved into a cold smile. "Orders are clear. We get the drive back. No mistakes." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating their faces for a brief, chilling second before the night swallowed them again. Across town, in the towering glass building that once bore Ethan's name on its top floor, a different kind of storm was brewing. The board members sat in an emergency meeting, their voices sharp and anxious. "He has it," hissed one of them, slamming a hand on the table. "Cole found the flash drive. If that evidence reaches the court, we're finished." Richard Hale leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey. His calmness was unsettling. "Then it won't reach the court." The others looked at him uneasy. "I have men handling it," Hale continued. "By morning, that lawyer will have nothing. The drive will disappear, and no one will believe the word of a disgraced executive or his bleeding heart attorney." Outside, the rain beat against the windows like 1,000 whispers, the sound of secrets being washed clean. Back at the ward home, the wind howled through the trees. Clara finally convinced Lily to sleep, though the little girl insisted on keeping Rex beside her bed. The dog lay curled at her feet, eyes half closed but alert, muscles tensed with instinctive unease. Michael sat in the office downstairs, double-checking every file on the drive. He saved backups, encrypted them, and copied the data onto his laptop. Just one more night, he muttered to himself. One more night, and this nightmare ends. But outside, the nightmare was already walking up the driveway. A faint creak echoed through the hallway. Too soft for a human ear, but not for Rex. His head snapped up, ears perked. A low growl rippled from his throat. Downstairs, the lock on the office door turned silently. Two shadows slipped inside, dressed in black, faces hidden beneath masks. Michael looked up, startled. Who the hell? The first man lunged. Michael stumbled back, crashing into the desk. The laptop fell to the floor, its screen flickering, papers scattered like feathers. "Stay down," one of the intruders barked, grabbing the briefcase. But Michael wasn't ready to surrender. He swung a desk lamp, hitting the man's shoulder. The briefcase slipped, crashing open. The flash drive rolled across the floor, stopping near the window. The second man dove for it, just as Rex burst through the doorway like a storm. His snarl tore through the room. He lunged, jaws clamping onto the man's sleeve, dragging him down with a roar. "Rex, no!" Lily's voice cried from the stairs, but the chaos drowned her out. One of the intruders kicked the dog hard. Rex stumbled but didn't retreat. He barked, teeth bared, defiance burning in his eyes. Amid the struggle, the second man grabbed something from his pocket. Another identical flash drive. With a quick motion, he switched it, slipping the real one into his coat before retreating. "Let's go," the scarred man shouted. They ran. The door slammed. Tires screeched outside. Rex chased them to the gate, barking furiously into the night as the car vanished into the rain. When Michael stumbled outside moments later, panting and bruised, the briefcase lay empty on the floor. He searched frantically. The flash drive was there, but something felt wrong. He plugged it into his laptop. Nothing. Just blank data. A decoy. His heart stopped. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He sank to his knees, face pale with guilt. "It's gone," he murmured, voice trembling. "I lost it. I lost everything." Clara appeared at the doorway, clutching Lily, her face pale. "Michael, what happened?" He looked up at her, broken. "They took it." Lily's small arms tightened around Rex, who stood panting beside her, his fur wet with rain. Her voice was a whisper. "We were so close." Outside, sirens began to wail, a distant, haunting sound that grew louder as red and blue lights flashed across the wet pavement. Michael buried his face in his hands. "It's my fault," he muttered. "I should have protected it." Clara sank beside him, silent tears running down her cheeks. The storm outside raged on, echoing the chaos inside their hearts. Rex stood near the window, ears forward, watching the fading horizon. Lightning flashed, reflecting in his golden eyes. He barked once, deep, powerful, then again, louder. To everyone else, it was just a sound carried by thunder, but to Lily, it felt like a promise. She looked up at him through her tears. "You know something, don't you?" Rex didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the distance, as if he could sense the truth, somewhere out there, hidden just beyond human reach. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of marble and glass. a monument to justice, or what people believed justice should look like. By sunrise, the steps were already lined with reporters, their cameras flashing like lightning against the gray morning sky. The air buzzed with murmurs, tension, and the scent of rain-soaked concrete. Inside, the courtroom overflowed. Every seat was taken. Every whisper echoed off the wooden walls. Spectators craned their necks for a glimpse of the man who had once been the golden symbol of corporate success, now branded as a criminal. Ethan Ward sat in the defendant's chair, his hands folded tightly on the table before him. He wore a plain gray suit that hung a little loose on his frame. Prison had taken more than his freedom. It had drained the color from his face, the confidence from his posture. Yet his eyes, though tired, still held something unbroken. The quiet dignity of a man who knew the truth, even when no one else did. Across the aisle, the prosecution team whispered among themselves. Their lead attorney, Daniel Price, was a man known for his cruelty disguised as charm. He thrived in spectacle, the kind of lawyer who smiled for cameras even as he destroyed lives. At the center of it all sat Judge Harrington, his black robe pressed, his expression unreadable. He was known for his discipline, his neutrality, but there was something about his gaze, a faint coldness in the eyes, that unsettled Michael the moment he saw him. Michael Cole, seated beside Ethan, was pale from sleepless nights. The dark circles beneath his eyes betrayed the weight of guilt he carried. In his briefcase, the flash drive, the fake one, felt like a stone in his pocket, heavier than guilt itself. He told no one what had happened that night. Not Clara, not even Ethan. The truth would have broken them before the trial even began. The clerk stood and called the room to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrington. Wood creaked as everyone rose. The judge entered, his steps echoing through the chamber, each one measured and deliberate. When he sat, the silence was almost sacred. You may be seated, he said. The trial of Ethan Ward versus the state of New York had officially begun. The prosecutor rose first. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, his voice smooth and practiced. This case is simple. The defendant, Ethan Ward, embezzled over $10 billion from his company. He used his position of trust to manipulate accounts and falsify reports for personal gain. Today, you will see undeniable proof of his crimes. He turned toward Ethan, his smile razor-sharp. And by the end of this trial, you will see that behind that calm face lies greed and betrayal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked like insects. Ethan kept his gaze forward, unmoving. His hands trembled slightly in his lap, and Michael reached over, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. When the prosecutor finished, Michael stood. His throat felt dry, but he steadied himself. Members of the jury, he began, you've heard the accusations, but I ask you to remember something simple. Appearances can deceive. My client, Ethan Ward, has been a victim of conspiracy, a scapegoat chosen to protect those truly responsible for this theft. His words carried conviction, but his heart pounded with fear. He turned to the evidence table, motioning to the screen where the financial documents were being displayed. We have data showing discrepancies in the company's transaction records, transfers that do not align with Ethan's approval timelines. He paused. Something was wrong. The screen flickered. The data looked different. The folder names were familiar, but the contents were not. His stomach dropped. He double-clicked another file. Again. Empty. Corrupted. No, he whispered under his breath. Mr. Cole? The judge prompted, a hint of impatience in his tone. Michael tried another file. The graphs that had once shown the unauthorized transfers. Now, they displayed random numbers, meaningless and scrambled. The flash drive in his possession was the decoy. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. The real evidence, gone. The prosecutor smirked from across the room. "Is there a problem, counselor?" Michael forced a breath, his palms sweating. "Just a technical issue, Your Honor. One moment." But the whispers had already begun. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. The audience leaned in, sensing weakness. The judge sighed. "Proceed, Mr. Cole. We don't have all day." Michael tried to recover, speaking faster now. "The evidence we had, the files, show a pattern of transactions that—" "Show us then," the prosecutor interrupted. "If this evidence exists." Michael froze. Every eye in the room was on him. Ethan turned slowly, confusion and fear in his gaze. "Michael," he whispered, barely audible. "What's going on?" Michael couldn't meet his eyes. "Something's wrong," he said softly. "They switched it. I don't know how, but they did." The prosecutor seized the moment like a wolf. "Your Honor, it appears the defense is unprepared, or worse, attempting to fabricate evidence." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The judge leaned back, his expression stern. "Mr. Cole, if you cannot produce verifiable proof, we will proceed with the prosecution's case." Michael tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He glanced at Ethan, then at Lily sitting in the second row, clutching Rex's leash so tightly her knuckles were white. The little girl's eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. She didn't understand the law, the files, or the strategy, only that her father's last chance was slipping away right in front of her. Rex sat beside her, ears pricked, sensing her fear. His eyes followed every movement in the courtroom, his body tense. The prosecutor turned to the jury again. "You see, ladies and gentlemen, when a man is guilty, even his lies betray him." The audience murmured in agreement. Cameras zoomed in on Ethan's pale face. Michael sank into his seat, defeated. His voice was gone. His proof was gone. Ethan turned toward his daughter, his expression a mixture of sorrow and helpless love. He mouthed the words, "It's okay," though they both knew it wasn't. Rex shifted, letting out a quiet, rumbling growl. The judge's gavel struck the desk. "Order!" The noise died, but the damage was done. Michael stared blankly at the corrupted data flashing on the screen, his heart pounding like a drum. The truth was so close, and yet just out of reach. As the session adjourned for the day, Ethan was escorted out in handcuffs once more. The press shouted questions. Lily pressed her face against her mother's side, crying silently. Only Rex didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the judge's bench, a low, steady rumble in his chest. He didn't know what corruption was. He didn't know about files or evidence or power. But something inside him, something primal, told him the enemy wasn't outside the courtroom. It was sitting right there, behind that bench, cloaked in authority and lies. And for the first time since Ethan's arrest, Rex's instincts began to burn with purpose. The final day of the trial dawned under a sky the color of ash. Clouds hung low over the courthouse, pressing down on the city like the weight of judgment itself. A cold drizzle fell, coating the stone steps and umbrellas of the crowd gathered outside. Reporters huddled under awnings, their breath fogging in the chill air, waiting for the verdict that would seal a man's fate. Inside, the courtroom was packed once again. No empty seats, no whispers of doubt left unspoken. Everyone had already decided what they believed. Ethan Ward, once a symbol of integrity, was now a fallen man. Lily, sitting between her mother and Rex, stared at the polished floor, her small hands clenched tightly around the dog's leash. She had dressed in her favorite yellow dress, the one her father used to call his sunshine, hoping somehow it would bring him luck. But even her bright color seemed muted under the weight of the day. Rex sat upright beside her, muscles coiled, tail still. His dark eyes flicked around the room, watching, waiting, listening. He didn't understand the words that floated through the air, but he understood tone, sorrow, anger, despair, and he could smell it on everyone. The judge entered, robe flowing, face expressionless. He took his seat, tapping his pen once against the bench. "Let us proceed," he said. His voice carried the authority of a man who had already made up his mind. Michael Cole rose from the defense table. His movements were slow, almost mechanical, like someone who hadn't slept in days, which, in truth, he hadn't. His hair was unkempt, his tie loose. The spark of fight that once burned in his eyes had dimmed to a hollow glow. He cleared his throat, but the words didn't come immediately. When they did, they were rough, almost breaking. "Your Honor," he began, "members of the jury, I have stood here these past weeks fighting to prove my client's innocence. I have searched. I have pleaded. I have believed that justice still had a voice in this room." He paused, staring down at his trembling hands. "But I can no longer continue this defense." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Cameras flashed. The prosecutor leaned back with a thin smile, feigning surprise he didn't feel. Michael swallowed hard. The evidence that could have cleared Ethan Ward was compromised. Without it, all I have are words, and words alone are not enough in a court of law. He turned toward Ethan, his face etched with guilt. "I'm sorry." Ethan didn't respond. He just sat there, hands folded, gaze fixed on the wood grain of the table. The muscles in his jaw tightened once, then relaxed, acceptance settling in like a quiet death. "Order!" the judge barked, slamming the gavel. The room fell silent again. Michael continued, his voice fading to a whisper. "I ask for leniency in sentencing. My client has maintained his innocence from day one. Whatever you choose to believe, I only hope you remember that truth, like light, can be hidden, but never destroyed." He sat down slowly. The sound of the chair scraping the floor echoed louder than it should have. The prosecutor rose immediately, his tone triumphant. "Your Honor, the defense has effectively admitted defeat. The prosecution rests its case." The judge nodded, eyes cold. "Very well. The court will issue its verdict." The entire room seemed to stop breathing. Ethan lifted his head, just enough to glance back. His gaze found Lily, small and trembling in the crowd. Their eyes met, father and daughter, a look that spoke 1,000 words no court could ever record. Lily's lips quivered. "Daddy," she whispered, but no sound reached him. The judge's voice droned on, formal and detached. "In the case of Ethan Ward versus the state of New York, this court finds—" But before he could finish, a sound broke the silence. Not words, but a sob. Lily burst into tears. It started as a small, broken cry, but it grew, echoing through the vast room until it filled every corner. "Please, don't hurt my daddy. He didn't do anything." Her voice cracked like glass, and for a moment, even the reporters stopped writing. "Order in the court," the judge demanded, but his gavel couldn't drown the sound of a child's heartbreak. Clara wrapped her arms around her daughter, whispering, "Shh, baby, please." But Lily only cried harder, her small body shaking with the force of it. Across the aisle, Ethan closed his eyes. Each sob tore through him like a blade. He wanted to hold her, to tell her it would be all right, but his hands were chained to the table, his world bound by rules and lies. A tear slipped down his cheek as he lowered his head, defeated. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he mouthed. "I tried." The room was heavy with the sound of quiet weeping. Not just Lily's, but others too. Some of the spectators, moved by the rawness of the moment, shifted uncomfortably. Even the prosecutor, for all his pride, looked away. And then, breaking through the sorrow, came another sound, deep, low, and primal. Rex. The German shepherd had been sitting silently beside Lily all this time, watching, waiting. But now his instincts screamed louder than reason. He let out a long, guttural whine that rolled through the room like thunder. It wasn't just a sound. It was grief made real. Heads turned, cameras caught it. The great animal stood, ears pinned back, eyes locked on Ethan. His tail was still, his chest heaving with every breath. "Rex," Lily whispered, reaching for him. He didn't move, didn't bark, just that haunting sound again, a mixture of pain and defiance, as if he refused to accept what the world was doing to his family. The judge, visibly unsettled, cleared his throat. "Remove the animal from the courtroom." But no one moved. For the first time in weeks, the crowd wasn't looking at the accused or the lawyers. They were looking at the dog, at the loyalty, the raw emotion that no man could fake. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan lifted his head slowly, his eyes wet but fierce. He looked at his daughter, then at Rex, and something in his heart shifted. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the faint memory of it. The judge tapped his pen again, breaking the spell. "The court will reconvene tomorrow for sentencing." The guard stepped forward, unlocking Ethan's chair. The metallic clink of chains echoed once more. As they led him away, he turned for one last look. Lily was still crying, clutching Rex tightly. The dog's head was bowed, but his eyes followed Ethan until the doors closed. The trial wasn't over yet, but in that moment, it felt as though everything, every dream, every promise, had already collapsed. Outside, the drizzle turned to rain. Inside, the courtroom stood still, haunted by the sound of a child's sob and a dog's cry that refused to be silenced. The next morning, the courtroom was cloaked in tension so thick it seemed even the air dared not move. The storm from the night before had cleared, leaving the city washed clean. But inside, the air was heavy with despair. Today, the verdict would be read. The final judgment that would decide whether Ethan Ward would spend the rest of his life behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. Spectators packed the benches, whispering like shadows. The media cameras hummed quietly, their red lights blinking like mechanical eyes, waiting to capture the fall of another man. Ethan sat motionless in the defendant's chair, chains glinting under the courtroom lights. His face was pale, but his eyes no longer carried the same desperation, only a tired acceptance. After everything, after all the fights, the sleepless nights, and the lies that swallowed truth whole, he had made peace with the idea that he might never be believed. Beside him, Michael Cole looked worse than ever. His voice was gone, his hope shattered. He had spent the entire night at his desk, flipping through useless files, trying to find a miracle that didn't exist. Now he simply sat there, staring at the floor, waiting for the inevitable. And behind them, in the second row, sat Lily. Her small hands clutched the worn leather leash of Rex, who sat obediently by her feet. The dog's amber eyes darted from her to Ethan, his ears twitching at every sound. He didn't understand verdicts or justice, but he knew fear when he smelled it, and he could smell it all over the room. The judge entered, robes flowing like shadows, face carved in stone. "Court is now in session," he declared. His voice was calm, steady, too steady. Ethan looked up at him, a flicker of realization flashing in his eyes. That calmness, that certainty, it wasn't neutrality. It was control. The same kind of control he'd seen in boardrooms, when men with power already knew how the vote would go before the meeting even began. Judge Harrington adjusted his glasses and shuffled the papers on his desk. "Before this court delivers its decision, are there any final statements from the defense?" Michael opened his mouth, but couldn't speak. What was there to say? He had no evidence left, no data, no hope. Only the eyes of a little girl watching him from the back row, silently begging him to save her father. He swallowed hard, shook his head, and whispered, "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded once. "Then the court shall proceed." The room fell utterly silent. The ticking of the clock seemed deafening. "Ethan Ward," the judge began, "you stand accused of grand embezzlement and fraud. Based on the evidence presented and the failure of the defense to provide substantiating proof, a small voice suddenly cut through the air. "Wait!" All heads turned. Lily was standing, trembling, tiny against the vastness of the room, but her voice, though shaking, carried the power of truth. "Wait!" she cried again. The judge frowned. "Young lady, you must sit down. This is a court of law." But Lily didn't sit. She took a shaky step forward, her little hands clutching Rex's leash. Her lips quivered, tears glimmering in her eyes. But there was fire there too, something pure and fearless. "Rex," she whispered, voice trembling. "There. That's where Daddy's truth is." And then she pointed, directly at the judge's bench. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The words hung in the air, absurd, yet powerful. Michael turned in confusion. "Lily, what are you—" But before anyone could stop him, Rex reacted. The German shepherd's ears shot up, his muscles tensed, and then, with the speed of lightning, he lunged forward. "Rex!" Michael shouted, reaching out, but the leash slipped through Lily's fingers. Gasps erupted around the courtroom. The bailiffs jumped to their feet, shouting, "Get that dog under control!" But Rex was already moving, faster than any human could react. His claws clattered against the marble floor as he sprinted straight for the judge's desk. His instincts blazed with purpose. The command from the girl had ignited something deep inside him. "Stop him!" the prosecutor yelled. "He's attacking the judge!" But Rex wasn't attacking. He was searching. He leaped onto the bench in one smooth motion, scattering papers across the floor. The judge recoiled, shouting in shock, "What is the meaning of this?" The bailiffs rushed forward, but Rex ignored them. His nose worked furiously, sniffing along the surface of the desk, through the piles of documents and folders. His growls deepened, rhythmic and focused, the low, warning sound of a trained canine on a scent. "Get that animal off me!" the judge barked, his voice cracking for the first time. Rex didn't stop. He shoved his snout under a stack of files, scattering them. His tail stiffened. A deep guttural growl rumbled in his chest. He had found something. Everyone froze. Rex pushed again, harder this time, until his nose caught the edge of a small envelope, taped underneath the bottom layer of folders. With a swift motion, he gripped the edge in his teeth and pulled it free, dropping it onto the floor. The envelope hit the ground with a dull thud. For a moment, silence reigned, a silence so deep it seemed to consume the entire room. "What is that?" Michael whispered, stepping forward. The judge's face drained of color. That's nothing, he stammered. Bailiff, remove that animal. But no one moved. Every camera turned. Every lens focused on that single envelope lying at Rex's paws. Michael's instincts took over. He rushed forward, snatching it from the ground. His hands shook as he tore it open. Inside was a flash drive, the real one, and a set of original signed documents bearing company seals and digital verification codes, the missing evidence. Michael's eyes widened. "Oh my God," he breathed. "It's here." Ethan rose from his seat, stunned, disbelief flooding his face. "What? How?" But before anyone could answer, the judge slammed his gavel down, his voice cracking under pressure. "That evidence is inadmissible. It's not verified. This is contempt of court." Michael turned on him, voice sharp with fury. "You knew, didn't you?" The judge froze. "You knew this was here," Michael said, his voice rising. "You hid it. You're part of this." Gasps filled the courtroom again. Reporters stood, cameras flashing wildly. Rex stood between them all. The one creature in the room who didn't understand corruption or fear. He just knew truth when he smelled it. And today, he had found it. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The courtroom hung in stunned silence, as if the walls had absorbed the collective gasp of every soul inside. Rex stood proudly at the judge's bench, chest heaving, the faint sound of his panting echoing like thunder in the hollow stillness. The torn envelope lay at Michael Cole's feet, its edges damp from the dog's jaws. Michael bent slowly, every movement deliberate, his heart hammering against his ribs. His trembling hands picked up the envelope. Inside, the faint metallic glint of a flash drive caught the light, and beneath it, several folded sheets of company stationery sealed with official signatures. It was the real evidence, the one they had lost, the one that could change everything. The judge's face turned deathly pale. That's court property," he stammered, his composure cracking for the first time. "Return it to me immediately." But Michael didn't listen. His lawyer's instincts burned through his fear. "This was hidden beneath your desk," he said loudly, his voice ringing through the chamber. "You were sitting on it the whole time." The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! I will not tolerate—" "Order?" Michael interrupted, fury spilling into his words. "You dare speak of order when justice was buried under your own fowls?" Gasps rippled across the courtroom like a wave. The sound of clicking cameras filled the air. A rapid, flashing storm capturing every twitch of the judge's trembling hand. The prosecutor, Daniel Price, jumped to his feet, his usual arrogance gone, replaced by panic. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We don't even know what that is." "Oh, but we do," Michael shot back, holding up the flash drive. "This is the same evidence that went missing from my client's possession 2 nights before the trial. The same evidence that would have cleared Ethan Ward until it was stolen. And somehow, miraculously, it found its way under the bench of the presiding judge." All eyes turned to Judge Harrington. His lips parted, but no words came out. Sweat beaded at his temple. Ethan, sitting in stunned disbelief, whispered, "Is it real?" Michael didn't answer. Not yet. He turned to the clerk at the front of the courtroom. "Please plug this in and verify the timestamp and signature. You'll find digital encryption keys tied to the company's internal system." The clerk hesitated, glancing at the judge, who glared back in silent threat. But the moment of fear passed when she saw the crowd, reporters, lawyers, and spectators, all watching her. Trembling slightly, she took the flash drive, inserted it into the courtroom computer, and opened the file. Lines of data filled the screen. Documents, transfers, memos, emails, all signed and verified. The timestamp matched the exact date Ethan had been accused, and at the bottom of the digital signature list were the names of 3 men: Richard Hale, Paul Jennings, and Martin Cross. The corporate board. The clerk's eyes widened. "It's real," she whispered. "The encryption is genuine. The signatures are authentic." The words detonated through the room, gasps, shouts, reporters scrambling to capture every detail. The courtroom that had been silent moments ago now erupted into chaos. Michael stepped forward, his voice steady despite the sung roar around him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is the truth. The company board orchestrated the entire embezzlement, using Ethan Ward's account as the scapegoat. Every transfer, every signature, every false report leads directly back to them." He lifted one of the printed documents for the cameras to see. "And this proves it." The prosecutor's face drained of color. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor." But the judge said nothing. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting toward the exit, as if seeking an escape from his own guilt. Michael's voice grew stronger. "These documents were hidden in this courtroom, under your desk. You weren't just complicit in the silence, Your Honor. You were part of it." The crowd erupted again. Reporters shouted questions. The flash of cameras painted the room in white light. Ethan, overwhelmed, pressed a shaking hand to his mouth. He looked from Michael to the flash drive, then to his daughter. Lily was crying, but this time they were tears of joy. She threw her arms around Rex's neck, burying her face in his fur. "You did it," she whispered through sobs. "You found Daddy's truth." Rex licked her cheek, his tail finally wagging for the first time in weeks. His body relaxed, no longer tense with fear or frustration, as if he too understood that his mission was complete. Michael looked back at Ethan. "It's over," he said softly. "You're going home." Ethan tried to speak, but his voice broke before the words could form. He pressed his hand over his face and let out a sound he hadn't made since the day of his arrest, a sob. Tears streamed down his face, raw and unrestrained. For so long he had swallowed every emotion, built walls around his pain. But now those walls shattered, and what came out was not just relief. It was grief, gratitude, and the unbearable weight of freedom finally within reach. Even the jurors sat stunned, some whispering prayers under their breath. The prosecutor lowered his head, defeated. The judge, cornered by truth and flashing cameras, tried one last time to speak. "This is outrageous." "Outrageous?" Michael snapped. "No, Your Honor. What's outrageous is how easily you were willing to destroy a man's life, how far you were willing to go to bury the truth." The judge's face twisted. He looked at the bailiffs, but even they hesitated to move. The room no longer obeyed his authority. Michael pointed toward him. "You will step down from this bench. Now." The courtroom fell silent again. The only sound was the hum of the lights overhead and the clicking of cameras capturing every second. Judge Harrington's hands trembled. Slowly, he removed his glasses, setting them on the desk. "I have nothing to say," he whispered. He rose, his once imposing figure suddenly small beneath the weight of his disgrace. Without another word, he turned and walked out through the side door, his black robe trailing behind him like a shadow being dragged into the light. The crowd exploded into applause and tears. Michael hugged Ethan. Reporters shouted questions. And through it all, Rex barked once, sharp, proud, victorious, as if announcing to the world that justice had finally been found. Lily held him tightly, smiling through her tears. "You're a hero, Rex," she whispered. For the first time since that terrible day, Ethan smiled. Not the polite kind, but the real, unguarded one of a man who had found his way back to hope. He looked at his daughter and his dog, the two souls who had never stopped believing in him, and whispered, his voice trembling with gratitude, "You saved me." The sound of the gavel struck once more, but this time it was not a symbol of condemnation. It was the sound of freedom, echoing across the courtroom. "Order," the acting judge announced, her voice firm yet trembling with emotion. She had replaced the disgraced Judge Harrington only hours earlier, summoned urgently after the revelation of his corruption. After reviewing the authenticated evidence, she declared, "This court finds Ethan Ward." The entire room held its breath. Reporters froze, pens suspended midair. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every tremor on Ethan's face. Innocent of all charges. For a second, there was silence. The kind of silence that comes right before thunder. And then, it happened. The courtroom erupted. Applause, cheers, sobs. The sound of release after months of torment. Reporters scrambled forward, flashes from their cameras painting the air in bursts of white. Ethan Ward, sitting at the defense table, blinked in disbelief. The words didn't quite reach him at first. Innocent. After everything. After the shame, the sleepless nights, the chains, the whispers, he was finally free. He rose slowly, almost uncertainly, as if afraid the moment would dissolve if he moved too fast. Michael Cole stood beside him, eyes glassy with relief. He reached out and gripped Ethan's shoulder. "You did it," Michael said softly. "We did it." But Ethan shook his head, tears already pooling in his eyes. "No, Michael," he whispered. "They did." He turned, and there, at the edge of the courtroom, stood Lily. Tears glistening on her cheeks, the instant his eyes met hers, she broke into a run. "Daddy!" Her voice cracked with emotion, high and trembling, but it cut through every sound in the room. The crowd parted instinctively as the little girl ran down the aisle, her tiny shoes echoing against the marble floor. Ethan dropped to his knees just in time to catch her. She collided into him, arms thrown around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "I knew you didn't do it," she cried, voice muffled by his suit. "I told everyone. I told them you're good." Ethan's arms wrapped around her tightly, his body shaking. "You never stopped believing," he whispered. "You and Rex. You never gave up." And then, as if on cue, Rex came bounding toward them, tail wagging furiously, barking once, sharp and joyful, like the sound of victory itself. He circled them, his paws tapping the ground, whining softly as if urging Ethan to notice him. Ethan laughed through his tears, reaching out a trembling hand to the dog that had become his guardian angel. "Come here, boy." Rex pressed forward, pushing his head into Ethan's chest, tail wagging so hard it brushed against Lily's dress. Ethan cupped the dog's face in both hands, staring into those loyal amber eyes that had never once looked at him with doubt. "You found the truth," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. "When no one else could." The words hung in the air, raw, honest, powerful. Rex licked his hand once and then rested his head on Ethan's knee, as if to say, "That's what friends do." Michael turned away briefly, wiping his eyes. Even the bailiffs smiled. The tension that had haunted the courtroom for weeks finally melted into warmth and humanity. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, Daniel Price, sat in stunned silence. His voice, so sharp, so confident before, was gone. And beside him, uniformed officers entered, their badges glinting. They approached the rear of the courtroom, where the board members sat trying to disappear into their seats. "Richard Hale, Paul Jennings, Martin Cross," one officer announced. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice." The men stood reluctantly, their faces pale as the cameras turned toward them. The sight of handcuffs being placed on the true criminals sent another wave of applause rippling through the crowd. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. Ethan Ward proven innocent. Corporate board arrested in shocking turn of events. But inside that courtroom, none of that mattered to Ethan. All he could see was his daughter's smile and the loyal dog sitting proudly beside her. Clara approached, her face streaked with tears. She hesitated for a moment at the edge of the aisle, almost afraid to believe this was real. But when Ethan's eyes met hers, that hesitation vanished. He stood, still holding Lily's hand, and Clara rushed forward into his arms. "I told you I'd come home," he whispered into her hair. She clung to him, sobbing. "I never stopped waiting." Rex barked once, circling around them again, his tail brushing their legs, the sound of his paws echoing like a heartbeat. The judge, now acting in place of Harrington, finally smiled. "Mr. Ward," she said gently, "you are free to go, and on behalf of this court, I apologize." Ethan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Your Honor." When the gavel struck for the final time, it no longer sounded like punishment. It sounded like closure. As Ethan, Lily, and Clara made their way toward the exit, reporters surged forward, shouting questions, but the world around them blurred. The noise, the flashing lights, the chaos, none of it mattered. All Ethan saw was Lily skipping ahead, clutching Rex's leash, the dog trotting proudly beside her like the hero he was. For a moment, Ethan paused at the doorway, looking back at the courtroom that had nearly destroyed him. The same walls that once felt like a prison now felt like a place where truth had clawed its way to light. He turned back toward his family, the faintest smile on his lips. "Let's go home," he said softly. Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Ethan didn't stop. He knelt beside Rex one last time before stepping down the courthouse stairs. People crowded around, clapping, cheering, some even crying. Strangers who had watched his life unfold on television, now witnessing his redemption in real time. Ethan looked into Rex's eyes again, tears glistening as he whispered the words only the dog could truly understand. "You found the truth when no one else could." Rex wagged his tail, barked once, a proud, resounding sound that seemed to echo across the courthouse steps, drowning out the noise of the crowd. And for a brief, beautiful moment, everything stood still. A man, his daughter, his wife, and the loyal German shepherd who had turned despair into justice. Tears, applause, and redemption filled the air, blending into a single, unforgettable symphony of truth finally set free. It had been several weeks since that unforgettable day in court, the day truth clawed its way back into the light, carried not by lawyers or judges, but by a German shepherd with a heart too loyal to surrender. The chaos had faded. The headlines were no longer about scandal or betrayal, but about redemption. "Rex, the dog who found justice," read one newspaper. "From courtroom to hero," said another. And for the first time in a long while, the Ward family's home was filled with peace. Ethan stood by a window in his newly opened office, the morning sun spilling across the polished floors. Outside, the sound of laughter and barking drifted from the training field, where several young dogs ran in circles, chasing each other beneath the fluttering banner that read, Rex's Promise, Foundation for Justice and Canine Welfare. The name gleamed in gold against the blue sky. He smiled, his heart swelling with pride. The foundation had started as an idea, a promise Ethan made to himself and to the loyal companion who had saved him when all hope was lost. Now, it was real. A place where justice met compassion, where police dogs were cared for, trained, and honored as more than tools of law, as partners in truth. Behind him, Michael Cole entered, carrying a stack of folders. "You know," he said with a grin, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be managing a nonprofit for police dogs, I would have laughed." Ethan chuckled, closing the blinds halfway. "And now?" Michael shrugged, smiling faintly. "Now I can't imagine doing anything else." He looked out the window. "You changed the system, Ethan. And that dog." He reminded the world that sometimes justice doesn't come in words or laws, but in loyalty. Ethan's expression softened. "He changed me too." They stood in silence, watching the dogs outside. Some gray-muzzled veterans resting, others young recruits brimming with energy. Among them, still proud and alert, was Rex. His coat gleamed in the sunlight as Lily's voice called, "Come on, Rex, one more time." The old hero barked and leapt gracefully over a wooden hurdle. Michael smiled. "She's been out there every day, hasn't she?" "Every morning," Ethan replied softly. "She says Rex likes someone to tell his story." Michael chuckled. "Maybe she's right." That afternoon, Lily sat on the grass surrounded by children from the K-9 Academy. Her hair was tied back with a blue ribbon, and Rex rested proudly at her side. "This is Rex," she said brightly. "He's a hero. He helped my daddy when everyone thought he was but—" The kids listened, wide-eyed. "He sniffed out the truth in court," she continued. "Dogs can smell lies. Can't they, Rex?" He barked once, making them laugh. Ethan and Michael watched from a distance. "She tells that story every time," Michael said. "She wants people to remember what he did." "What truth means," Ethan answered. "I used to think justice lived in laws, but now I know it lives in hearts like his." As sunset painted the sky, Ethan knelt beside Rex. "You did it, boy. You gave us back our lives." The dog pressed his muzzle into Ethan's hand. Quiet gratitude. "Closing up, boss," Michael called. Ethan rose, patting Rex's side. "Come on, partner. Let's go home." The light caught the tag on Rex's collar. Rex's promise, justice, loyalty, truth. Years later, an older Lily stood on a sunlit hillside among memorial stones for fallen police dogs. She touched one. Rex, the dog who found the truth. That day, her voice echoed. A dog's heart smelled more than lies. It smelled justice. Images flowed. Rex running through green fields, standing tall beside Ethan, guarding Lily with quiet devotion. "He taught us," Lily's voice continued, "that truth can't be buried forever. That even in darkness, loyalty brings light. Rex wasn't just our hero. He was proof that love never stops fighting." The final scene, a bronze statue on courthouse steps, Rex immortalized in sunlight. At its base, Rex's promise, may truth always be found. People paused to touch the paw of the hero cast in stone. Then, one last shot. A German shepherd running freely through golden fields, sunlight in his fur, a heartbeat, a bark, an echo that never fades. At the heart of this story is a simple truth. Love and loyalty know no language. A German shepherd like Rex reminds us that sometimes the purest kind of faith doesn't come from words, but from quiet devotion. The way a dog waits, guards, and believes in us, even when the world doesn't. Their loyalty isn't earned through status or power. It's earned through kindness, patience, and shared moments that don't need explaining. If this story touched something in you, maybe take a moment to deepen that bond with your own dog. There's a wonderful resource I've come across that helps people understand their dogs on a more emotional level, how they think, feel, and trust. You can look it up when you're ready. It's worth your time. Because in the end, what we give to our dogs, our care, our calm, our love, they return to us 100-fold. That's their quiet promise. And it's one of life's greatest gifts.